Good morning, everyone. I hope you're doing well. I hope you had a great week last week. So today we're going to continue our journey in the book of Genesis chapter 41. And the title this morning is When You Honor God, God Honors You. And so in Genesis chapter 41 verse 1, I'll read in English. It says, when 2 full years had passed, Pharaoh had a dream and he was standing by the Nile. We are told here that Joseph waited in that prison for 2 full years after the whole episode that happened between him and the cupbearer and the baker in Genesis chapter 40. Now, we are not told how long he was there before that incident. God used the long, grinding years in the prison to teach Joseph patience, to teach him to depend on him. God placed Joseph in a waiting room and left him there until some valuable lesson has been learned by Joseph. Waiting is a very common theme in the Bible. Abraham had to wait for 25 years before the promise was fulfilled of Isaac being born. David had to wait for 15 years before he became a king. Israelites who were in exile, had to wait for 70 years before they could return back to Israel. Jesus had to wait for 30 years before he could start his ministry. So if you are in a waiting room, if you feel like you are in a waiting room, if you feel like God has put you in a waiting room, you are in a good company. Waiting room is all about, when you feel like God seems to have forgotten you. It's about a time when you feel like all that you're doing, all the time you're praying, and your prayers not being answered, and things are not going according to your plan. It seems like God is not even interested in you anymore. Have you been in the waiting room lately? It's never easy to be in a waiting room. It makes you anxious. It makes you nervous, uneasy, fearful. Not knowing what's going to happen is not something that we like. And during that being in the waiting room, the best thing to do when God puts you in a waiting room is to pray and to be surrendered to him. And that's what Joseph did. As he was in the waiting room, as he was in the prison, he was surrendered. He went on doing what he was supposed to do, even though he had no idea how long he's going to be in the prison. Now, when you are in a waiting room, you can choose to have 2 attitudes. One is you can be surrendered to God and continue to do your best in whatever you're doing. Basically having a good attitude like Joseph. And good attitude produces good behavior, which in return produces good results. Or you can have a bad attitude. And while you're in a waiting room, you can complain, grumble, be negative, be critical. And what a bad attitude does, it only produces negative behavior, which in turn produces bad results. Also, when our attitude is bad, our time in the waiting room seems to be longer. But when our attitude is good, the time seems to be lesser. So the choice is ours, how we respond when we are in the waiting room. And waiting room we are going to be, if not today, tomorrow. Joseph chose to have a good attitude. And we'll see what happens as we read further. Now Pharaoh had a dream. And so let's read verse 2 to 7. So now Pharaoh had 2 dreams. The first dream was about a fat and a skinny cows. 7 fat, plump cows come out of the Nile and they're eaten by 7 skinny, ugly cows. Now, if you know about cows, actually cows are not carnivorous. They don't eat flesh. They eat grass. But that is not that important. And then he had another, the Pharaoh got up, he was awake, and then he went back to sleep. He had a second dream, and he had a very similar dream where this time he saw 7 healthy stalks and 7 thin stalks, and the thin stalks eat up the 7 healthy stalks. And verse 8, it says, in the morning his mind was troubled. Pharaoh didn't take this dream lightly. In his heart he knew that there was something important about that dream. He couldn't figure it out what it meant, and so the Bible says in verse 8, so he sent for all the magicians and all the wise men of Egypt. Pharaoh told them his dream, but no one could interpret them for him. He sought the counsel of all the wise men, all the magicians from the whole of Egypt, and not one of them could figure it out what the dream was. And so as Pharaoh was talking to all these people, it looked like the cupbearer was overheard all the conversation, because in verse 9, the cupbearer said to Pharaoh, "Today I am reminded of my shortcomings." The cupbearer finally remembered Joseph and confessed the wrong he did against Joseph by forgetting him, or by allowing him to stay there for 2 long years. Acknowledging our mistakes. Now, we all make mistakes. But the right thing to do is to acknowledge a mistake. And that is one of the most humble thing to do. It's a right thing to do when you do something wrong. And see, when we acknowledge a mistake, it brings healing. But pride stops us from owning our mistakes. Pride stops us from taking responsibility. And by not doing that, it stops us from changing and growing. The big secret of changing and growing: take responsibility. And that's what the cupbearer did. He took nobody knew about it. But he in his heart knew that there was something he did wrong. Now, what made the cupbearer remember Joseph? Let's read verse 10 to 30. The cupbearer basically tells Pharaoh what happened. How the Pharaoh was angry with his servant, and how did he imprison both the cupbearer and the baker. And that each of them had a dream the same night. Now, if you remember last Sunday, I told you, why was it important for Joseph to speak the truth to the baker? And I told you that I will let you know this Sunday why that was so important. Because if he had not spoken the truth to the baker, then things would not have turned out the way Joseph had said it would turn out. It would look more like a coincidence. Half of what Joseph said came true, and half of that did not come true. And the reason the cupbearer remembered Joseph after 2 years was because in verse 13, look at what it says. He said that things turned out exactly as he interpreted to us. Because it was exactly what he said came true, everything about both of them. That's when the cupbearer remembered Joseph. See, when you speak the truth, you prove yourself to be trustworthy. People take you more seriously. For the cupbearer to remember Joseph and recommend him to Pharaoh because he found Joseph to be honest, truthful, and trustworthy. Let's read further. Let's see what happens. In verse 14, it says, "So Pharaoh sent for Joseph, and he was quickly brought from the dungeon. When he had shaved and changed his clothes, he came before Pharaoh." Now, one thing you got to understand. When it was time for God to get Joseph out of the prison, it all happened very quickly and very swiftly and very smoothly. Often we feel there are long periods of time when God doesn't do anything. But when his timing is right, everything comes together in an instant. Not your timing, God's timing. One moment he was a prisoner, the next moment he's standing in front of the Pharaoh with a clean shave and a clean clothes. And what we learn over here, what we see is God's timing is perfect, the wait is worth it, and the outcome is outstanding. But whenever we try to change God's plan, whenever we try to change God's timing, it always ends in disaster. Now in verse 15, now he is standing before one of the most powerful person on earth. And so Pharaoh said to Joseph in verse 15, "I had a dream and no one can interpret it, but I have heard it said of you that when you can hear a dream, you can interpret it." Now Pharaoh gave Joseph a golden opportunity to glorify himself, to take all the credit. But we see over here, Joseph did not use this opportunity to, glorify himself or take credit before Pharaoh. In verse 16, he says, "I cannot do it." Joseph replied to Pharaoh, "But God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires." What Joseph's response is, "I can't, but God can." Joseph doesn't take credit, but gives credit to the one who deserves. And in this thing, we see it is God. It was God who gave him the ability to interpret the dreams. We like to take credit. In fact, we also like to take other people's credit and make it our own achievement. And it happens all over the place, especially at the workplace. We see colleagues taking credit of the other persons, and showing and claiming that it is them. They did the hard work and they did achieve what they could. And we do the same thing with God. Instead of giving Him the credit of whatever you have accomplished, whatever you have achieved, it is all about I did it, I worked hard, I achieved it. There's a warning in Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 17 and 18 to the Israelites. And so what God is saying is that when your power and strength, you might say to yourself, I have achieved all these things. In verse 18, God says, but remember, it is He, that is God, who gives you the ability to produce wealth and so confirms His covenant. So it is God who gives us the ability. But then in verse 19 and 20 of Deuteronomy 8, God gives a warning that if you forget, let's see what happens. When we take credit for other things or other people's work or what God has blessed us, in a way we are idolizing ourselves. And when we don't give credit to the one who deserves it, or when we take credit for ourselves, it's a sign of insecurity. It's basically a sign of how low self-worth you have. That's the reason you want to present yourself as big, better, important. Joseph was so secure in God that he made sure that he gave credit to God for all the gift and talents he had. Now, if you notice, Joseph has also changed. It seems he's become wiser and more humble compared to the time when he was younger and when he told his brothers the previous dreams. And he went around self-glorifying himself and had this self-confidence, which is now completely gone. So God's work of character building was being accomplished in Joseph's life, even when it looked like nothing was happening. Your character gets built not when things are easy. Character gets built when things are hard, when you go through difficult times. So where did God mold Joseph's character? From the pit to the prison so that he can be prepared for the palace. We cannot avoid the pit to the prison experience if you want to succeed in doing something great. We all like to go have the palace experience without the pit to the prison experience. Shortcuts in life will cut short your path to success. Now Pharaoh again narrates the dream to him from 17 to 24. So we won't read, again it's a repetition of what we read, but let's read verse 28 to 36 as we don't have much time. So here we see Joseph interprets the dream. And what Joseph says is that the dream is the 7 fat cows represented the 7 years of abundance of growth in the land. And then it said the 7 ugly cows that ate the healthy cows represented the 7 years of famine. And basically what Joseph is saying that all the abundance in the land will be forgotten when the famine comes. Isn't that true for in life as well? When all the good things are forgotten, when we remember only the bad things. We all had great good things to remember. But when we go to bad times, we forget all the good things. We forget all the blessings. We forget all the good things that we have experienced. And it's same true for people also. When one person makes a mistake, we forget all the good that person has done, all the good thing that he has. We only remember that one bad mistake or one bad thing that he has done. And what we see over here is that God used a pagan king to exalt his chosen one. Now God put the right people at the right place at the right time. It was not a coincidence. It was the hand of God. What are the chances? Think for a moment. Think for a minute. What are the chances the brothers of Joseph putting him in a pit, and at that same moment, at the same location, the merchants are coming at the exact same route and he was sold to them? What are the chances about that merchant selling him to Potiphar? And what are the chances of him being exactly in the same prison where the cupbearer and the baker would come? And what are the chances about both the cupbearer and the baker having the dream on the same night and Joseph being able to interpret that? And what are the chances of the baker or the cupbearer forgetting Joseph? Because imagine if he was released, then at this point of time, the cupbearer wouldn't know where to go look for him. What are the chances of Pharaoh having the same dream, similar to him twice? What are the chances of the cupbearer hearing the dream and remembering Joseph and recommending him, knowing that he's still in prison? Coincidence? Not so much of. I hope you can see God puts the right people at the right place at the right time. I hope you can see that God's hand working. And not only in Joseph's life, but God's hand is working in your life too. Because God has put you exactly where He wants you. He has put the people that in your life that He wants, and at the right time, He wants to bless you. Until then, we got to be faithful like Joseph and continue to do what is right. So in verse 33 to 36, he tells Pharaoh what's going to happen. And then he not only interprets the dream, but he goes the extra mile and gives the solution to the king, what needs to be done to avoid the disaster. And what does he say is that in verse 34, let a fifth of the harvest of Egypt during the 7 years of abundance be collected all over Egypt and kept. Basically, a fifth basically means 20%. That's a good principle actually for us also for saving. 20% of whatever you earn. Especially if you're single or you're married without kids. A great, number, 20% to save so that when bad time comes, you have things to take care of yourself. But never once does Joseph seek to promote himself. He says, in fact, you should find someone who is wise and who will do what needs to be done. Self-interest was not part of Joseph's character. Joseph's concern was not to honor himself, but to bring honor to God. And because he does that, God in turn honors Joseph. Let's read verse 37 to 40 as we close out. The Pharaoh is so impressed by Joseph and his interpretation and his suggestion and his solution that he says, can we find anyone like this man in whom is the Spirit of God? He can see the presence of God in Joseph. Joseph is exalted. In fact, he says, you shall be in charge of my palace and all my people are to submit to your orders. Remember, he was a slave and now he's come to the point where that everyone apart from the king is going to honor him. Wow. Only God could do such a thing. It is not a luck, not a coincidence, a hand of God. When you honor God, God honors you. And the rest of the chapter, verse 41 to 57, I'll just summarize it. Joseph is 30 years old when he enters Pharaoh's service, and in that 7 years, he gets married and has 2 sons. And after the 7 years of abundance comes the famine as predicted by Joseph. But now because of Joseph, they were prepared to face the famine. And so when people came to Pharaoh asking for food, he would send them to Joseph and told them that do whatever Joseph tells you to do. Joseph turned out to be a good steward. And what he did is he opened the storehouse and sold the grains to people who were in need. And not only people from Egypt came, but even neighboring countries, when they heard that Egypt had food, they came to buy grains from Joseph. So we see God use Joseph to save Egypt, the neighboring countries from dying, but also, if you don't realize it, but God also used Joseph to save his very own family, as we see in the next chapter next Sunday. So in conclusion, what are we taking away from this passage today? A few things that stands out. Number one is God is in control of our life, brothers and sisters. Whatever you're going through, maybe you are in a waiting room right now, God is still in control. He's working in all your life, even when you cannot see his activity. And he has a plan to deliver you and promote you in his time. Not your time, his time. And what should our response be? All situation, in all circumstances, let's make sure we seek to glorify him. As you wait patiently for him to accomplish his purpose in your life. And so because Joseph honored God, God honored Joseph. Remember, when you honor God, God will honor you. Thank you very much. God bless you. Have a great week.